Welcome to Gashley United Methodist Church. I am Jen, one of the pastors here, and I am excited to be with you today. Today is the third Sunday in Advent, Advent being the season of preparation. And today we're going to dig into Luke 1, verses 57 through 66. My son Aiden, who is now a senior in high school, has struggled with his mental health since he was around 3 or 4. At age 4, we actually took him in and had some tests done, and he was diagnosed with severe depression and anxiety, as well as oppositional defiance disorder. So his younger years, probably needless to say, were very taxing on him and our family. We had lots of psychology appointments and counseling appointments, as well as just regular doctor appointments and meetings with his school, teachers, administrators, all those kinds of things very often. Lots of doctors and psychologists would say, hey, let's try this combo of meds, right? Only to have them not work or make the issue even worse. He's a sensitive kid who, when he felt good, was funny and loving, but when he wasn't feeling good, was incredibly hard to parent. He hated when schedules changed or anything new was offered. It would send him into a spiral. He would be irritable for no reason. He would cry and couldn't tell you why. He would explode in anger, but didn't know why he was so mad. He had trouble managing his emotions, and every emotion he had was at an extreme level. If you've ever had a child who struggles with any type of medical or mental issue, you know that the whole family struggles with them. It can take a toll on the entire family unit. When quarantine began, our family was supposed to begin a family trip. It was going to be the first family trip where all of us got to go, other than, going on little short trips to visit relatives. And Aiden was doing well on his meds. We had a good combo, it seemed like. And we felt like we were prepared for traveling with him. And we made sure that we brought all the comforts that he liked to make sure that this trip was a success. We were headed northwest. We were going to go to some state parks. We'd bought one of those state park passes, right? That you get into all the parks for free. Our destination was California, and mainly Disney. We wanted to take the kids to Disney. So then when we came back, we would come southeast and visit some more parks and landmarks and attractions on the way home. And my husband's mom had already come in from out of town to watch our dogs for us. Needless to say, quarantine happened, everything closed, and my family and I were so very disappointed that we were not going to be able to do this trip. And so on a whim, which is so not like me, let me say that, on a whim, we were able to change our hotel from California to Galveston, Texas. And we made sure that the hotel was open and they still had services. We packed the car and we left. No itinerary, no plan really. We just felt like we needed to get out of town. So we got to Galveston, we got all checked in, we stood out on a balcony and looked at the ocean and looked at all of the really neat, brightly colored homes that were around the hotel that we were in. Now, the kids had never been to the ocean before. I had been, my husband had been before, and I specifically had been to Galveston before when I was around 15 years old with my dad. So I was excited to take them. And yes, before you say it, I know it's not one of the most revered beaches, but it's a nice beach. So before they got out of the car, when we pulled up to the beach, I said, even though my kids are good swimmers, do not go past your knees in the water. I've heard stories of, tides pulling kids and even adults, and I just didn't want to have this be the trip that we remember because of an accident. So we began exploring the beach. We looked at shells and we drew pictures in the sand and our initials, and they played in the sand and we took pictures. And pretty soon I looked up to do a head count and I noticed that my son was waist deep in the water. And I yelled for him to come closer, and as he was walking towards me and got closer to the shore where I could see him, I noticed the look on his face. It was sheer joy. A joy I had never, ever seen on him before. He was laughing, and he just seemed so carefree, especially for a child who seemed to really carry the world on his heart. And I just stood there in amazement and watched him. And pretty soon my daughter came over and she stood with me, and I felt like God was there telling me that it was all just gonna be okay. That every decision we'd ever made to try to help Aiden, our family, every crying session, every extreme emotion, all of it was worth being in this moment, watching him so incredibly happy. And I knew going forward it was going to be different. So today is the third Sunday of Advent, Advent being a season of preparation for the birth of Jesus. And wonder is all around us. Can we recognize it? And as we learn how to rejoice in a weary world, can we live in a way that allows amazement and wonder to surprise us often? If joy feels out of reach, can we first allow ourselves to notice and take in the amazing wonders in each day, wonders that we too can easily ignore? And maybe those wonders are as simple as the swirl of the creamer in your morning coffee, or a nest that a bird has built in a tree by your home. Or maybe watching a toddler take steps for the first time and discover their confidence to walk. Or maybe it's just as simple as looking at the sunbeams that come through your windows. Allowing ourselves to be amazed requires this posture of paying attention, something that I think we're not very good at anymore. And then saying yes to wonder when it washes over us. Amazement is also a balm for the weary. It awakens those who feel numb. It renews those whose senses have been dulled. And surprisingly, it may turn into joy. How often do you allow yourself to be amazed? So a little backstory on Elizabeth from our scripture. We have to remember that she was a wife of a priest, and she came from a family of priests in the house of Aaron. And Elizabeth was a godly person. She gave loving attention to her husband's priestly vestments and to her home, where godly people came to talk over temple matters. And she believed in miracles, and she thanked God for the wonders in the lives of God's people. Even the stars that shone above her little home represented God's goodness. And if God could make stars shine, God could bring forth to her a son who would glorify God. How could she, and even we today, possibly doubt? When Elizabeth gave birth to her son, she watched over him with this feeling of tenderness and joy and amazement. There was great rejoicing with Elizabeth after the birth of her son. However, there seemed to be a pause in the praise when the name of the child did not align with the traditions of the day. And failing to believe Elizabeth, the gathered crowd motioned to Zechariah to name the child, and they were so surprised when his selection was the same as Elizabeth's. And in that moment, the crowd was amazed. Zechariah was freed to speak, and praise was the order of the day. Fear came over the neighbors, and when fear happens, the rumor mill will go wild. Surely the hand of the Lord would be on this child, John. When we are amazed, we tend to share the news, right? Either seeking validation that it's shocking news or to witness the shock factor that the news has on others. We see this play out in our life all the time. Something happens out of the ordinary, winning the lottery. Someone pays off someone else's layaway or loan. A car gets donated to someone in need, or maybe even on the other side, right? Someone breaks into our car overnight or does something to our property. A couple years ago, I was waiting for someone to meet me for a meeting in the city that I live in, and I saw this normal guy come out of the local Jimmy John's, and he was walking to his car, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this other guy comes running up and just starts beating this guy, pummeling him to the ground. I was shocked. Like, I couldn't even think. And next thing I know, I see other people come over. They break it up. The guy goes running off. Of course, they call 911. The ambulance comes. I told people about it, right? In the coming hours and days after that. I told them because I was shocked that it had happened. Right in front of me, in the daylight, completely out of nowhere. We are in amazement when these things happen. And while our first reaction is shock or amazement, our second reaction is to tell someone about it. Either to get them to believe you or to see if they're just as shocked as you were when you saw that or you received that news. Either way, rejoicing is found in the laughter that just took place, the amazement of what you're telling them. And when we acknowledge our weary world while remembering what God has already done and what God is doing, then we can rejoice. When was the last time that you were truly amazed at something? Have you ever experienced the feeling of amazement turned into unexpected joy? What ways do you practice awe? What habits or rituals or exercises can allow you to be amazed more frequently? Like joy, amazement is a motif throughout the beginning of Luke's gospel. The following people we just mentioned were specifically described as being amazed. The neighbors of the Judean hill country at John's birth, everyone in Bethlehem who hears the shepherds' good news, and Mary and Joseph after they receive Simon's blessing in the temple. And additionally, there are many instances in these opening chapters where we presume that the characters are filled with wonder and awe, including when Zechariah discovers he can speak again. Why does Luke's gospel emphasize joy, amazement, and wonder while telling the birth story of Christ? In Luke 1:58, Elizabeth's relatives and neighbors, they rejoice with her after John is born. The Greek word for rejoice is sukaro, which means to celebrate God's grace. Celebrate it together, to share in someone else's joy. Then, when Zechariah's voice returns, he rejoices by praising God through song, through singing. In this story, we see the ripple effect of contagious joy, of joy that grows when it is shared. How does amazement change or shape us? What does it compel us to do? As soon as his voice returned, he sung. And not just any song, but a song of thanksgiving to God, a lullaby of blessing for his newborn son. Now, one might argue that for Zechariah, the wondrous miracle of finding his voice again compels him to rejoice, to thank God, and to pass blessings on to others. Can we allow amazement to do this to us as well? Sharon Salzberg, an author and mindfulness teacher, she describes awe as the absence of self-preoccupation. She argues that it can help silence one's inner critic. Recall Zechariah's initial response to the angel's news. He was critical, right? And he wanted certainty. However, in this part of the story, perhaps the miracle of finding his voice silences his criticism, allowing him to be swept up into awe, giving thanks for his place in the larger community of faith. What do we learn from Zechariah's transformation? And friends, you have to remember too that Elizabeth didn't just wait 9 months for a child, right? She waited her whole life for a child. And John the Baptist played a unique role in the history of God's people. His mission was to go ahead of the Messiah and proclaim his coming. John's life was a special meaning for all of us. We, through our baptism, also are called to proclaim his coming. Our lives individually and collectively are meant to send out a message, an invitation to others to come and share our experience of faith and love and fellowship. Come and experience the amazement and awe of Jesus Christ. We should be in amazement at what the Lord does every waking moment, but especially in this season of weariness. We should be able to find that joy and that amazement. Now, my son still talks about that trip where he jumped into the ocean. He also talks about the look on my face when I saw him waist deep in the water. Our family still talks about how much joy Aiden had at that experience and our own amazement as we watched him. And in a time where we had all been weary from parenting, weary from traveling, weary from medical issues, weary from the world, we found amazement and the joy on a young boy's face over experiencing the ocean for the first time. An ocean that was a creation and a wonder of God. So in this season of weariness, I hope you are able to see joy and amazement in all that you do and you see. And I leave you with this today. We believe in a God who knows our names, who counts the hairs on our heads, and carries the dreams in our hearts. We believe that God's fingerprints are all over creation and that God is forever speaking to us in a million different ways. We believe that awe and wonder, goosebumps and laughter, telling stories and paying attention are all ways that we can say thank you to our creating, sustaining, and loving God. And we commit ourselves to moving through this world with eyes wide open, with porous hearts and grateful spirits. We commit ourselves to living lives of awe and wonder and gratitude, trusting that these things will forever draw us deeper into God's loving arms, because we believe. We stand in awe. Amen. Go in peace.